Story of the World, Volume 3, Chapter 14. The Rise of Prussia. Part 1. Frederick, the first Prussian king. Imagine that you're at a huge family reunion where all of your aunts, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and third cousins are gathered together. Everyone is talking at the same time. Everyone wants to know what part of the family you belong to. "And who are you?" one of your third cousins asks you. "I'm a Smith," you might answer. You want everyone to know that you're not a Johnson, or Lee, or a White. You and your parents and your brothers and sisters are all Smiths. That's an important part of who you are. But now try to imagine that your family doesn't identify itself by its last name. Instead, you name yourselves after the room in your house which you spend most of your time. When your third cousin says, "Who are you?" you might answer, "I'm an upstairs north bedroom," or "I'm a downstairs computer room." You're all still members of one family, but it's more important that you're a downstairs computer room or an upstairs north bedroom. That's how Germans thought of themselves after the 30 Years' War. If you lived in England, you were English. If you lived in Spain, you were Spanish. But if you lived in one of the little German states, you probably didn't think of yourself as German. You were a citizen of your little state. And there were 300 little German states, each ruled over by a prince. But then one of those princes decided to build his little state into a kingdom, a German kingdom. Prince Frederick ruled the German state of Brandenburg in the eastern part of Germany. Frederick had also inherited another little kingdom, the kingdom of Prussia, even farther east than Brandenburg. Brandenburg lay within the borders of the Holy Roman Empire. So when Frederick was in Brandenburg, he had to obey the Holy Roman Emperor. But Prussia wasn't part of the Holy Roman Empire. When Frederick was in Prussia, he didn't have to obey anyone. So Frederick asked the Holy Roman Emperor for permission to call himself King of Prussia. The Holy Roman Emperor was grateful to Frederick, who had helped him fight off the armies of Louis XIV, and Prussia wasn't part of his empire anyway, so he agreed. But he only gave Frederick permission to call himself king in Prussia. He wanted Frederick to remember that he could not behave like a king in Brandenburg, only in Prussia. In January of 1701, Frederick rode to Königsberg in Prussia and held a coronation ceremony for himself. He dressed himself in scarlet robes and sat on a royal throne. He put the crown on his own head, put a scepter into his own hand, and announced, "I am now King Frederick the First," and he marched to his wife's rooms and crowned her queen. Afterward, he held a huge royal feast. Now he was the Prussian king. Frederick didn't actually have permission to be a king in Brandenburg, but when he paraded back into Brandenburg, he entered its largest city, Berlin, like a king. Cannons fired. All over the city, bells rang. Candles and torches and lanterns were lit in every window so that the city glowed like a star. Like Louis XIV, Frederick wanted to be an absolute monarch, obeyed without question by all of his people. But he knew that the Holy Roman Emperor wouldn't approve, and he didn't have a strong enough army or enough money to wage wars, collect taxes, and behead his enemies. So instead, Frederick just behaved like an absolute monarch. He called his entire kingdom Prussia, so that all of his subjects, even the ones in Brandenburg, could call him their king. He spent enormous amounts of money on feasts and elaborate ceremonies. His court was one of the most splendid in Europe. His son later said, "My father had the appearance of kingship long before he was truly a king." But Frederick's play acting helped the citizens of his kingdom, both inside and outside of the Holy Roman Empire, begin to think of themselves as members of one Prussian kingdom. Imagine that your parents get tired of everyone calling themselves upstairs north bedroom or downstairs computer room and decide, we should all think of ourselves as Smiths. But instead of commanding you to call yourself a Smith, they hold a big party to show how proud they are to be Smiths. Every morning, they parade through every room singing, "We are Smiths. How lucky you are all to be Smiths." After months of this, you might start thinking of yourself as a smith rather than a downstairs computer room. That's a little like what happened in Frederick's new kingdom of Prussia. Frederick encouraged all of his people to think of themselves as citizens of the German kingdom of Prussia. Until this time, people in most countries were loyal to a piece of land, like the island of Britain, or to a monarch, like Louis XIV or Philip II of Spain. But Frederick knew that his kingdom was made up of two different pieces of land and that his power as monarch was limited. So he wanted Prussians to be loyal to something different, a state. Prussians learned to pay allegiance to an idea of a German kingdom ruled by a German king. They used the word Reich, the German word for kingdom, to refer to this German kingdom. Frederick spent most of his reign building this idea of a German kingdom called Prussia. He founded a great Prussian university, as well as a Prussian Academy of the Arts and a Royal Prussian Academy of Sciences. He gave this Academy of Science the job of studying the German language and teaching all Prussians how to use it properly. Frederick's son, Frederick William I, took Frederick's ideas even further. He formally announced that both Prussia and Brandenburg were part of the Prussian kingdom. He made the army stronger, and then Frederick's grandson, Frederick II, took his grandfather's quote-unquote kingdom in name and turned it into a real power. He fought to add land to Prussia. He built himself a royal palace, not in Königsberg, but in Brandenburg itself. He gave Prussians a reason to be proud of their Prussian state. For this, Frederick's grandson became known as Frederick the Great, and one day, the Prussian kingdom that his grandfather had established would become the modern country of Germany.